Chidera's mother clung tightly to her arm from her bedridden state, her voice weak but insistent. Give me grandchildren, my daughter. Let me hold just one before I die. Mwam, she pleaded, her eyes filling with a familiar intensity. Chidera looked at her mother, exasperation creeping into her voice. Mommy, stop it. You're not going to die, she replied, though a pang of fear twisted inside her. Chidera sat alone at the restaurant, her mind drifting into memories as she gazed around. It was the same restaurant that held memories of her and Amaka. The same restaurant where Amaka had once proposed and suggested they live together, that they take a chance on a future away from prying eyes. And the same restaurant where she had walked away from that proposal, shackled by the weight of her mother's illness. If only she could turn back the hands of time. It had been nearly 2 years since Amaka left, and the void she left behind seemed to grow deeper each day. For the first 6 months after Amaka's departure, they had kept in touch almost daily, their calls a lifeline. But over time, those conversations grew sparse, like sand slipping through her fingers. As life continued to pull them down separate paths, staying connected became harder. By now, their calls had dwindled to just once in a while. In fact, they hadn't spoken at all this September, and the month was already drawing to a close. A hollow ache settled in her chest. Amaka has probably made new friends by now, she thought. Maybe even found a new girlfriend. The thoughts tightened around her heart. She could almost picture Amaka wrapped in someone else's arms, rhythmically breathing on each other, holding her just like she had once held Chidera. The memory washed over her, unbidden, bringing with it an intense pang of longing and a soft flush of warmth. She reached out for the glass in front of her, taking a slow sip of wine, letting the taste linger, hoping it might dull the edges of her loneliness. Her mother, now in recovery, echoed in her mind, a constant reminder of expectations she could barely bring herself to meet. Give me grandchildren. She had no idea about Chidera's love for Amaka or how deeply that love had run throughout the university. With a sigh, Chidera finished the wine and poured the rest of the bottle into her glass, feeling the weight of emptiness settle in once more. She was just about to lift it to her lips when someone approached her table, casting a shadow across her. Hi, beautiful angel, a masculine voice said, and before she could react, the man slid into the seat opposite her without asking. Chidera sighed inwardly, annoyance flickering across her face. Another man, another interruption. She set her glass down, already standing to leave. But the man, Uchenna, as he would introduce himself, held up a hand, his voice softening. I'm sorry if I was too forward, he said, his tone laced with sincerity. Please, I just wanted to talk. I I lost my mother yesterday and came here to be alone. I thought maybe talking to someone might help, but I understand if you'd rather not. Chidera paused, the words striking a chord within her. Just a few months ago, she had been terrified of losing her own mother. She slowly lowered herself back into her seat, her expression softening. I'm so sorry for your loss, she murmured gently, her gaze meeting his with empathy. Uchenna nodded, managing a small grateful smile. Thank you. It's been a lot to process. As they began talking, the tension between them eased. Their conversation drifted from memories of family to the bittersweet realities of life. For a moment, Chidera felt a fragile sense of connection, though the shadow of her past love lingered nearby. As weeks passed, Chidera and Uchenna started spending more time together. She found comfort in his steady presence, a reliable and uncomplicated companionship. In moments of quiet, she realized she was beginning to understand what Amaka might have seen in Mr. Ike back then, a safe platonic connection. But there was a crucial difference. Uchenna wasn't content with just friendship. He wanted something deeper, something real. Chidera sat in her room one evening, staring down at her phone, her thumb hovering over Amaka's contacts. Days had passed since they last spoke, and each attempt to spark up a conversation seemed to fall flat. Amaka's replies felt distant, her responses short, distracted. Chidera could feel the growing distance between them like a weight in her chest, suffocating and inescapable. Unable to hold it in any longer, she typed a message, her fingers trembling slightly as she hit send. I know you found someone new. The message was marked as read almost instantly, but the reply never came. She stared at the screen, her heart sinking as the read receipt lingered, a silent rejection. The hurt washed over her like a tidal wave. She wanted to cry, to let the ache spill out, but she'd promised herself no more tears over Amaka. With a resigned sigh, she whispered to herself, it's over between me and Amaka. In the days that followed, she let herself be swept into Uchenna's world, agreeing to his gentle request to make things official between them. But even as she accepted his affection, a gnawing emptiness remained, an unfillable void left by Amaka. She tried to ignore it, even attempted to find that connection elsewhere, joining online lesbian communities, meeting new people, hoping she might find someone who could ease the ache Amaka left behind. But all her efforts felt shallow, lacking the depth she craved. Chidera was careful to keep her future self hidden from Uchenna, masking her hesitations with careful excuses. Kissing him was the hardest part. Each time he leaned in, she found herself pulling back, inventing reasons to avoid it. After a month of subtle evasion, Uchenna finally sat her down, a gentle smile on his face, but worry in his eyes. Do I have bad breath or something? He asked, a hint of humor in his tone, though she could see he was genuinely concerned. Chidera chuckled softly, trying to hide her discomfort. No, Uche, it's nothing like that. Then what is it? He pressed, his voice soft. You're allowed to be honest with me, you know. She forced a smile, struggling to find the right words. I just, I just don't really like kissing, that's all. Uchenna nodded, his expression thoughtful as he squeezed her hand reassuringly. That's okay. I can be patient. But patience wasn't the answer to what weighed on her heart. Inside, she wanted to scream out to Amaka, to beg her to come back, to save her from this life she was trying so hard to fit into. Yet every attempt to reach Amaka ended in silence, and her heartache only deepened. One day, while heading home from her new job at a publishing firm, Chidera saw a familiar face alighting from a bus. Her heart skipped a beat. It was Susan, the girl who'd been far too close to Amaka during their time in the university, a rivalry that had kept Chidera uneasy for months. Susan noticed her too, her eyes lighting up in recognition. She walked over with a bright smile, And before Chidera could decide how to react, Susan wrapped her in an unexpected hug. Longest time, Chidera, Susan beamed as they pulled back, studying Chidera with a knowing look. Yeah, it's been a while, Chidera replied, forcing a polite smile. They exchanged numbers, though Chidera felt a twinge of reluctance. Despite her reservations, she found herself agreeing when Susan later invited her out for drinks. A few evenings later, they sat in a dimly lit bar, the air thick with unspoken words. So, Susan began, taking a sip of her drink. How's life been since school? You seeing anyone? She raised her eyebrows, her tone casual, but her eyes probing. Chidera hesitated, feeling her cheeks flush. Uh, I'm seeing someone, yes. Susan gave her a knowing smile, leaning in slightly. Still into, you know, she hinted, her voice low, as if discussing a secret. Chidera felt a knot tighten in her stomach, but she forced herself to respond. Some things haven't changed. Susan nodded, her gaze growing more distant as she swirled her glass thoughtfully. And Amaka, how's she doing? I heard she left the country. Lucky her. If I got that chance, I'd leave this place too, she said, sighing wistfully. Chidera's polite smile began to fade, irritation bubbling beneath the surface. She shifted in her seat, glancing at her watch. I think I should get going. I'm already late for. Susan caught the hesitation in her voice, raising a hand. No need to make up an excuse, Chidera, she said, sighing. I get it. There was a bit of silence before Susan's gaze softened. Look, I always knew how much you two loved each other. I mean, even when Amaka and I were close, it was obvious she still had a thing for you. Chidera's heart stopped, her voice catching in her throat. Close? What? What do you mean by that? Susan shifted, suddenly uncomfortable. Oh my god, she didn't tell you, did she? She looked away, biting her lip, regret washing over her face. I I thought you knew. I'm sorry, Chidera. I didn't mean to bring it up. You two were intimate. Chidera's voice cracked, a blend of shock and disbelief flooding her tone. Susan frowned, her eyes widening. Chidera, I I thought you knew. It was just it was just one night after a party. She she told me it was a mistake. But the words barely registered. Chidera's world began to spin, her breath coming in shallow gasps as she fought back the sting of tears. Without another word, she rose from her seat, nearly knocking her drink over in her haste. Susan called after her, but the words fell away as Chidera stumbled out of the bar, the cold night air hitting her like a slap. She could barely see through the blur of tears as she walked aimlessly down the street, her chest tight with betrayal. Amaka, how could you? You lied to me. Her heart cried out, the ache consuming her with every step. When Chidera got back home, the anger and hurt churned within her, each thought like a fresh sting. She wanted to block Amaka's contacts and erase her from her life, but as she opened her phone, she hesitated, remembering the last time she tried to walk away without a word. No, she thought, not again. This time, she needs to know the truth. With tears streaming down her cheeks, she typed a message, her fingers trembling with a mix of pain and rage. I know what happened between you and Susan at the party. She hit send, her heart pounding as she waited. Almost immediately, Amaka saw the message and the typing indicator appeared. Chidera watched as the little dots blinked on the screen, feeling an unexpected flare of anger. Oh, so she can reply quickly now, she thought bitterly. All this time, she acted too busy to respond. But now, the message came true. Nothing happened between me and Susan. I already told you that. Chidera stared at it, a dozen questions swelling in her mind. Her fingers moved to type, but she paused when she saw that Amaka was typing again. The next message came through, longer and sharper, and it hit her like a punch. I'm here killing myself every day, trying to save enough money to come back and try again after you jilted me the last time. And all you can do is sit there and come up with these silly ideas. First, you accuse me of having an affair here, and now this nonsense about Susan. What exactly is your problem, Chidera? Chidera read the message, feeling a cold dread settle over her. She could barely breathe. In all the years she'd known Amaka, she had never seen her this angry. Her words cut deep, slicing through Chidera's doubts and defensiveness until only raw vulnerability remained. She stared at her phone, her mind racing. What was she supposed to believe? Her thoughts tangled in a storm of emotions as she typed a tentative reply. I don't know what to believe, Amaka. But as her thumb hovered over the send button, uncertainty froze her. Her heart wavered, and she closed her phone screen, burying her face in her hands as sobs broke free. She hadn't wanted this. She hadn't wanted any of this. The familiar chime of new message jolted her, but she hesitated before looking, afraid of what might come next. Slowly, she opened the screen and read Amaka's latest reply. Question mark. A moment passed, and then another message appeared. Chidera, I didn't mean to be like that. Chidera clenched her jaw, her eyes filling with fresh tears as she let her phone fall beside her, curling up on her bed. Chidera closed her eyes as Uchenna leaned in, his lips meeting hers with a tender softness. She felt herself drifting, memories flooding her mind, carrying her back to the first time Amaka had kissed her. She could almost feel Amaka's warmth, the way she made her feel complete, as Uchenna continued, oblivious to her thoughts. Tears pricked at her eyes, and she struggled to hold them back, swallowing down her sorrow as she had an intercourse for the first time. When he finally pulled away, he smiled, looking at her with a mix of adoration and surprise. I didn't know you were still a virgin, Chidera, he whispered, his fingers gently brushing her cheek. My love for you just tripled. Chidera's heart twisted, and she felt herself pulling inward, shielding herself from the reality she was facing. She sat up slowly, feeling numb, her head spinning. Let's get married, Uchenna continued, his voice filled with conviction. She turned to look at him, her expression unreadable, like she couldn't quite believe what he had just said. He moved beside her, his eyes shining as he reached into the bedside drawer. With a slight flourish, he pulled out a small box, opening it to reveal a delicate ring. Dropping to one knee beside her, his gaze held hers. Chidera Chukwu, knowing you has been the best thing that has happened to me since I lost my mom. Please, he paused, his voice a soft plea. Do me the honor of being my wife. Chidera stared at the ring, a blankness settling over her. She wanted to feel something joy, gratitude, relief, but all she felt was a void. Her heart was elsewhere, bound to a past she couldn't escape. After a long silence, she forced herself to speak. I I need some time, she managed, her voice barely a whisper. Uchenna's face fell, disappointment flickering across his features, but he sat back on the bed, reaching for her hand. I'm willing to wait for you, Chidera, he said, his voice gentle. I'm patient. That night, after returning home, Chidera went straight to the bathroom, turning on the shower as hot as it would go. She stepped under the water, tears mingling with the stream as she scrubbed at her skin, trying to wash away the pain, the confusion, the feeling of emptiness. She whispered to herself, a tremble in her voice. I finally did it. I finally broke free of Amaka. But as the words left her lips, they sounded hollow. She pressed her hands against the shower tiles, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. She had given herself to a man, a part of her, hoping it would sever the hold Amaka had on her heart. But instead, she felt a deep sense of disgust and shame. Why did Amaka have to keep breaking my heart? Why hide things from me? Why all these secrets? She pressed her fists against her chest, her voice a broken whisper. I just want a normal life. Her anguish was interrupted by a sudden scream from down the hall. She froze, panic gripping her. Mommy! She shouted, quickly grabbing a towel and wrapping it around herself before rushing to her mother's room. Her mother was lying in bed, gasping for breath, her face pale. Chidera felt her own breath hitch, fear flooding her veins as she called out for help. Neighbors quickly gathered, helping her rush her mother to the hospital. Hours later, Chidera stood by her mother's bedside, her vision blurred by tears. The doctor had told her, in gentle but firm words, that her mother's condition was deteriorating. At best, he had said quietly, she has about a year left. Her mother's voice broke through her thoughts, soft but filled with warmth. Chidera, my daughter, don't cry for me. I've lived my life, she murmured, reaching for Chidera's hand with a faint smile. All I ask is that you allow me to see my grandchild before I leave this world. Chidera felt a fresh wave of sorrow overwhelm her as she held her mother's frail hand, her chest tightening at the thought of her mother's dying wish. Days passed, and Chidera found herself staring at her phone, the screen casting a dull glow in the dim room. After their last heated exchange, she hadn't spoken to Amaka. It was November 28th now, and they hadn't exchanged a word since the 10th. The silence stretched painfully between them, and doubt gnawed at her heart. Had Amaka been deceiving me all along? She wondered. Was everything we had just a lie? Her chest tightened as tears welled in her eyes. She couldn't take the silence, the doubts any longer. She dialed Uchenna's number, her decision made. When they met later that evening, they sat in quiet reflection for a while. Finally, Chidera broke the silence, her voice steady but emotionless. I will marry you. Uchenna's eyes lit up, a joyful smile breaking across his face. He reached for her hand, his fingers warm and secure. You have no idea how happy that makes me, Chidera. She managed a small, hollow smile, telling herself that this was the right choice. She would fulfill her mother's wish, give her a grandchild, and build a new life, one without the ghost of Amaka haunting her every step. It was the best decision, she reasoned. This would finally end her obsession with Amaka. In the days that followed, fate played its hand, and after just that one encounter with Uchenna, Chidera discovered she was pregnant. It was Harmattan season again, mid December, and the air was thick with dust, carrying a chill that seemed to seep straight into the bones. Chidera sat alone, wrapped in a cozy blanket, scrolling through a catalogue of evening wear on her phone. Her mind was only half focused, the other half drifting through her thoughts as the dry air scratched at her skin. Suddenly, her phone chimed with a new message notification. She glanced down at the screen, her heart freezing as she read the sender's name, Amaka. Chidera, the message read. Guess what? Chidera's eyes widened, her heart pounding as she stared at the screen, almost afraid to reply. It had been nearly 2 weeks since she'd last heard from Amaka, and the silence had felt like a slow, agonizing stretch of uncertainty. Now, out of nowhere, Amaka was back. Before she could even respond, another message appeared. I just got back to the country. I'm in a taxi on my way to my house. I know, I wanted it to be a surprise. I've missed you so much, Chidera. Let's meet at the restaurant tonight at 8 p.m. Chidera's heart dropped. She wasn't expecting this at all. She sat frozen, staring at the screen as a flood of emotions washed over her: joy, confusion, fear. Amaka actually came back for me. But as her initial shock faded, reality set in like a cold hard slap. However, will I explain all of this to her? She thought, a hand instinctively moving to her stomach. She wasn't the same woman Amaka had left 2 years ago. She was pregnant now, engaged to another person. Amaka had no idea about the whirlwind of changes that had unfolded in her absence. Her phone buzzed again. Amaka was calling. Chidera hesitated, staring at the ringing phone in her hand. A dozen thoughts raced through her mind, each one a blend of hope and dread. Finally, she took a shaky breath and answered. Chidera! Amaka's voice was warm, bright, and brimming with excitement. Just hearing it sent a pang of longing through Chidera's chest. I bet you are surprised, huh? I've been planning this for ages. I couldn't bear it any longer. I had to come back. I've missed you so much. I I can't wait to see you. Chidera tried to summon a smile, but it felt forced. Amaka, I I don't know what to say. I wasn't expecting this. Amaka laughed on the other end, the sound so familiar and comforting that it almost made Chidera forget, for a brief moment, the complications that lay ahead. I know, I wanted to surprise you, she said, her voice softening. I just kept picturing your face when I showed up. Tonight at the restaurant. I can't wait. Chidera felt a pang of guilt tighten in her chest. She forced herself to respond, keeping her voice steady. I, I'll be there. Great, Amaka's voice was palpable, almost infectious. It's like old times, right? Just you and me. I'll see you soon, Chidera. As the call ended, Chidera stared blankly at the screen, her mind spinning. She was torn between a flood of emotions. How could she go tonight? How could she possibly explain this to Amaka? She could already picture the look of shock, the pain, the questions that would inevitably follow. Chidera whispered to herself, voice heavy with dread. This isn't going to end well.